And now I'm going to hit start the webinar. So welcome everyone who's just joined. We're going to give everyone just a few minutes to log in and we'll get started in about 2 minutes.
It's a good book. Is it backwards? It's backwards, huh? Gary Nabhan, University of Arizona, so Tucson. The book is Where Our Food Comes From. He's a superb writer. You Google him and you'll come across probably 25 other books that he's written, all related to food and seed saving, and he's an amazing guy. Last name is spelled N-A-B-H-A-N. N-A-B-H-A-N.
For those who just joined us, we'll be just starting in just a couple of seconds, and thank you so much for coming. So hi everyone, my name is Andrea Feller and I am the Curator of Education here at the ASU Art Museum. On behalf of the museum's director, Mickey Garcia, and the Creative Impact Board, and I'd like to thank both Mickey and everyone from the board who's able to join us tonight for being here. They would all like to thank you for coming tonight to celebrate the opening of DinnerWhere, which is on view at the Ceramics Research Center through October 9th. In 1967, the ASU Art Museum began building a contemporary studio ceramics collection, and it has emerged as a national and international destination point for the hands-on study and enjoyment of ceramics since the opening of the ASU Art Museum Ceramic Research Center in March 2002. We would like to thank our supporters of the CRC, particularly those who participated in our current fundraising campaign to fund the CRC's programs, exhibitions, and its critical role as a teaching and research facility in the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts. We hope you will consider a donation in support of the CRC, and shortly we will have a link in the chat. This evening we are celebrating DinnerWhere, which features plates, cups, bowls, and a life-size ceramic dining table. DinnerWhere explores how these material objects reference themes such as a national identity, ritual, and consumption. So first this evening, we're going to start with an overview of the exhibition by our curator, Mary-Beth Buesgen, and then we will speak with some of the artists, and we have some local community members here to talk about food resources in the Valley. Mary-Beth?
Thank you, Andrea. The first thing that I would like to do is also thank a bunch of people. I would love to give a big thank you to both Elaine and Sid Cohen for their exhibition sponsorship for DinnerWhere, and the continuous support and generosity is just amazing. Thank you guys for all you do. I would like to thank Sarah Kelly, the Wingate Curator of Contemporary Craft and Design. She supported me on this exhibition, the advisory committee for the exhibition, as well as the artists that are here tonight, Joan Barron and Marilyn Liso here, and Cleiades and Eddie Dominguez, who did a pre-recording for this program this evening. I would like to thank the museum friends for their support of the CRC, those who already donated to the CRC campaign, and to welcome all the new faces out here tonight. Last but not least, I would also like to thank the entire museum staff for all their hard work to make DinnerWhere a successful exhibition and creating an exciting program for this evening. All of you play an instrumental role in the success of the CRC and programming, so I appreciate you all. So the first thing that I am going to share with you is a short video that I did closer to the end of the installation for this exhibition. So I just wanted to everything else will be installation shots, still shots. So I just sort of wanted to give you a sense of space. So as this is playing, I'll also read the introduction panel since you can't really see it from where you're at. So hold on one second. Okay. Drawn from the ASU Art Museum's distinguished permanent collection, DinnerWhere features plates, cups, bowls, and even a life-size ceramic dining table. DinnerWhere explores how these material objects reference such themes as national identity, ritual, and consumption. For example, the Democratic Cup, which you're seeing here now, is a project that includes 50 artists across the country, and it encourages dialogues around societal and political issues related to human rights and democracy, reinforcing the dignity and inclusivity of all Americans, regardless of race, religion, gender, sexuality, and culture. Here we have Marilyn Liso here's Bad Manners, which really focuses on the gluttony and excess and really raises the question about what is necessary and what is luxury. For some, the dinner table is symbolic as the place where we nourish ourselves, come together to celebrate important milestones, share ceremonial experiences, and create capacities for shared empathy and understanding. Cleiades' work, which I'll show you in a little bit, called True Feelings, asks us to consider our tactile and emotional relationships to the objects used during such ceremonial events. However, we must acknowledge the complexities and diversities of cultural experiences and privilege across the country, and for some that the table is a reminder of cultural assimilation and the loss of traditions. Additionally, as you see these pieces here, the political climate of 2020 highlighted a long-standing racial and economic disparities, including the availability of nutritious food resources. Today, awareness continues to expand, and discussions around food and feast must also recognize those who grow, prepare, and serve our food, and the systems of power that create hierarchies of privilege. This exhibition is an invitation to engage with and connect to your personal memories of dining, as well as larger societal issues. We encourage you to explore the prompts throughout the exhibition and reflect. So this is called the, I've been calling it the conversation wall. So this is the Democratic Cup project. We do not have the full collection, but the Everson Art Museum was gracious enough to loan this to us for this exhibition. And there are many cups dealing with many social and political issues. And we received, I think, 25 of the cups. And what Sarah and I did was we looked at what we had and started putting them in themes. And from there, we prompt the visitors to read the question and really start in conversations. So I have here the sets just so you can see them up close. And the first question is, what can we do to provide equitable rights and resources to all communities? And then this is the name of all the cups. How can we support everyone's right to express their beliefs and identities openly and with no fear? How can we facilitate safe conversations and enact changes to resolve systems of violence and oppression? How can we build a healthy and effective form of government to best care for all people in the United States? What does community mean to you, and who do you consider to be part of your community? And then fittingly, the cup is called Reflection, and the question is, after reflecting on the exhibition and its conversations, what will you do to be kind and support one another? When I first started thinking about this exhibition, it was going to be more about design and style and the history of dinnerware. And then as we got into 2020 with the pandemic, I started looking at it more of how do we gather, and food resources, food insecurity, social issues, things that have always been occurring in the United States, but have been exaggerated with the pandemic. So one design set that I did want to share is the Russell Wright, which is the American Modern Dinnerware set. So during the era of the World Wars around 1914 to 1945, there was a pride in the nation that rose in the United States, and there was a lot of support for recovering economy, especially for the middle class residents. And so this dinnerware set was introduced in 1939 and really appealed to many people for its curvy silhouettes and just the sleek style and very simplistic, which was definitely different than the Art Deco era that came prior. And so this was very affordable for the wider consumer base. And they compare this, the American modern dinnerware set as the little black dress. So, and then in the back, you'll see a cabinet with plates and cups. And this is from Eddie Dominguez. Eddie mentions that he really wanted to push the vessel forward, and we have a pre-recording of him that we'll be sharing later on in the program. And so he will expand on that thought. So bad manners, of course, I connect this to food insecurity, hoarding that's been happening for the past year, just the excessiveness of everything on this table. It's just an amazing piece. It's an installation of over 300 objects. There's 4 hollow sets of clothing surrounding the table with gluttonous portions of food. And the forms don't represent actual individuals. They represent rather the idea of mindless and thoughtlessness consumption. And I'll let Marilyn speak for herself, but I do know reading that Marilyn does believe in giving back to the community. And I hope that this is correct, but when this piece was sold, she did give a portion to the organization, the Hunger Project. So
That's correct.
What's that? One of the fun things that we did when pulling bad manners was we did a time-lapse video because this was just an amazing work from, starting from the artists to the prep team, the registrars, conservation. So all these boxes, there are about 33 boxes that we picked up from offsite storage. And then everything was laid out, unpacked and laid out on the tables. And then they were cleaned, conditioned, and then they were installed. So I think Kat will put a link to the our YouTube channel. Andrea, the curator of education, she did an interview with myself and the prep team and the registrars and conservation. So you can see all of the process from beginning to end. So focusing on 2020, these pieces really represent social issues and political issues. I'm happy to announce that these are our newest acquisitions into the ceramics collection at the ASU Art Museum, thanks to Elaine and Sid Cohen. This is a collaboration between Justin Rothschink and Isaac Scott. So Isaac Scott is getting his MFA from Tyler Art School. And during the pandemic, his studio was shut down. And so he didn't really have a creative outlet. And so he borrowed a digital camera from one of his friends and felt that, as a young Black artist, that he should be part of this journey with the Black Lives Matter protesting in Philadelphia. And so he documented all of these protests, and Justin reached out to him, another ceramic artist, and wanted to do a collaboration. So Justin did the forms, and then they put the photographs, the images on the pieces. And then Justin's known for using floral decals. So the mug has poppies on it, and Justin's been using that as a symbol of how he protests against violence and guns and that sort of thing. And the poppies are represent from Remembrance Day all of the soldiers who died during the war. So this is Justin's line of political pottery. So he does have his own practice, but in addition to his practice and collaborations, he does political pottery and has been doing it since 2005. And his goal with this line is to educate his local conservative community and acknowledge the steps society continues to take and include a more diverse group of people in politics. So in front of us, the mugs, we have Stacey Abrams, we have Deb Holland, we have AOC, we have Bush, and then of course, Vice President Harris, and then the notorious RBG. And I think this is a nice, selection. It really is also celebrating the women that are now these powerful voices in politics right now. So this is Clades, which we also have a pre-recorded interview with that we'll show later on. And so we bring up rituals and ceremonies, and these are a series of actions and gestures performed to support the traditions or beliefs of an individual or community. And so with True Feelings, I don't want to give too much away from later, but they did this project and they had a lot of parameters. And one of them was they had to be blindfolded the whole time, and they had to keep it at a certain size. And so you can see the tactileness of just all the little fingerprints. And, I feel that when I pick a bowl or a mug or a plate, that is part of my ritual of eating, because it has to fit nicely in your hand or just have the right feel. And so bringing in a conversation about that. Do you have a special object that you always seem to gravitate towards? Oops. So the last area of the exhibition, it's sort of like a visual conversation, speaking of like food resources. And so it's a bright and vibrant and positive area of the exhibition that I hope actually brings hope and inspiration to people. And, talk about the food resources that are out there and the community gardens, and just knowing that there are resources there, which we'll talk to Hillary later about as well, for people in the Valley. And I just want to point out that this cactus garden in the middle is by Eddie Dominguez. And this is actually a dinnerware set. So he ended up stacking this to make a sculptural garden, but each piece, as you on layer, it's cups and saucers, and the leaves are plates. So it's functional and sculptural as well. So that's it for the walkthrough. Andrea?
Thanks so much, Mary-Beth. Would you scroll back so we could see Marilyn's work really quickly, please? Thank you. So tonight, joining us live is Marilyn Lyso here. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for taking the time to join us. So Marilyn graduated with an MFA from Washington State University and taught at Kansas City Art Institute, the Ohio State University, and the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred. She's also the founder of Cowgirls Chocolates, and she continues to run a chocolate shop in Idaho. So I have a few questions for you. If anyone in the audience has any questions, please either put it in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will ask Marilyn. She will answer any questions we have. But first, so Marilyn, about 38 years have passed since you created Bad Manners. Would you be able to share any recollections of the process of creating this work? Did you have any struggles or wins or any other memories that you would be willing to share with us?
I'll try. That's a long time ago. I remember it being a very fun piece to work on. Making the cakes, you basically put the piping on just like you'd be doing icing, and coming up with the ideas of how to mix the foods. It was just fun to do. However, the idea behind the piece was a serious idea. I'd like to blend the seriousness with the idea of humor at times. And I was thinking about what is a luxury, what is a necessity, it depends on what culture you're in, what economic level you are on. And so there's a lot of interpretation on this. And you were right, when it did sell, I was able to donate to the World Hunger Project. And I feel art enlightens us, and it's food for our souls, but it also, it should do a little bit more. And I figure that by giving a monetary amount to an organization that tries to study hunger and to alleviate it, I felt that was necessary to do as an artist. That I just don't do the piece, but I do something else. I just remember it as being a lot of fun and joy to do. It's hard work, but I was younger then, and so I didn't have the aches and pains of what happens now when you work, but it was fun.
Well, for me personally, Marilyn, it's a joy to look at that piece. So one of the things the museums do before we put works on display, especially when they're in our permanent collection, is we have a conservator on our staff, and they do things, cleaning, repairing, anything that a work of art needs to be done. So I'm just curious, how long did it take you to make this work from start to finish?
It took 1 year. I was faster in those days. It's a complicated piece. Probably the hardest part was doing the tablecloth and the figures. the figures were done just as if on the men's coats, as if I were a pattern for sewing. I would put the pieces on as if I was putting cloth like on. I rolled them onto plastic so that I could hold it up and put it on the piece. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do pieces. The idea happens. I try to figure out the form that idea will take. And then you have to figure out, like an engineer, how are you going to make that? How does it work? And that, to me, it's not the same. Each time I do a piece, it's not the same. It's different.
That makes perfect sense to me. So one of the things that the education team and our curator, Mary-Beth, talked about is we just talked about how this piece has maintained so much relevancy since you initially created it 38 years ago. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I just am happy that it does, and it will in the future. Because it's important when you spend time and you create. I think composers, artists, actors, it's the same thing. You hope that the performance or the art that happens, the composition that happens, can hold in 50 years and 100 years, that it's still relevant. So I'm happy that it is. You don't know at the time if it is or not, but I'm pleased.
So I have one last question for you. And so from our previous conversations, which I want to thank you for your time talking to me earlier, I know that life has taken you away from art making for a few years as you prioritize family. But can you tell us a little more about the performance piece that turned into a business venture for you?
Well, in Bad Manners, you'll see that there's a lot of chocolate on the table. And my very first job when I was 16 was in a chocolate factory. So that played into when I was doing that piece. My husband and I did some art book magazines in the 90s. And I was curious about, how does one sell something? How do you sell something? You have a price on it. How do you find someone to buy it? And so I started a chocolate company called Cowgirl Chocolates. My brother came up with an idea of putting spicy peppers with chocolate. People made fun of them, and I thought, no, that's a good idea. So I worked on it, and it was like going to Harvard to business school. It started off as an art performance piece, but it ended up being a bona fide business. It won a lot of awards. We were on TV, on the Food Network. We had orders all over the world. Antarctica, the Harry Potter studio in London, England, was buying chocolates from us. And I learned so much about business. And also, I found that I really enjoyed talking to people. Like, so when the person from Antarctica called, you get a conversation with people. And I think my art really does deal with that, where I am interested in ordinary people, extraordinary people. And I was able to sell it a few years ago. And so it brought more money than I ever sold a piece for. So I figured the art performance worked out, and I learned a lot. And because I had people working for me and people had jobs, we have a smaller shop called Moscow Candy, and we still sell chocolates. We still sell the Cowgirl chocolates. And so all that chocolate that's on that table is the instigator for not only Bad Manners, but for having a chocolate shop now. And there's one more interesting thing, I don't know if people know, but Bad Manners was in a collection, and when the estate was closing, we were told that if we didn't bring the piece, that piece had to be out of the estate by a certain day. And if it wasn't, they were going to throw it in the dumpster. So I thought that's an odd thing to think of when real food is thrown into a dumpster, to have a ceramic piece that took a year to do to be thrown into a dumpster. So my husband and I got our butts down there really fast down to California, and we packed it up and got it over to Tempe. So
Marilyn, can I ask you a
There
question?
you go, the story.
Marilyn,
Yes.
did the collectors actually have it installed in their house at all times? Like, was it up?
Oh, they had it installed in their house at all times, and it was they loved it. And I heard stories of people that saw it, like the maid that cleaned it all the time. Her little daughter was in art class, and the teacher actually was talking about this piece. I don't know exactly how she knew about it or whatever, but the little girl said, "Oh, I know that piece. My mom cleans it." And they didn't believe her. They said, "Oh yeah, sure." And here she went home and she was crying, and the Mrs. Taubman, who owned the piece, and her husband, she invited the whole class over to see the piece. So they loved it. They had it a special, there was skylit under a skylight, and so it was up.
Great story.
Any other questions?
It doesn't look like we have any others right now, but feel free to add any questions if they come to mind. So next, I want to share the video I did earlier today with Eddie Dominguez. So Eddie is a graduate from Alfred University, and over the years, he's received 2 National Endowments for the Arts grants, and he's participated in numerous artist residencies, and he currently teaches at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He sends his best. He wished he was able to make it, but he had a timing conflict with the time change. So if we will now go ahead and share my interview with him. Hi, Eddie. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk about your work. So I have a few questions for you, and bear with me for 1 second while I share my screen, as I want to give everyone a chance to see your work. So would you tell me a little bit about the 2 pieces in our exhibition, DinnerWhere, of yours that we have? So this first one is DinnerWhere is Cactus that you see on the screen. And the second one is Knickknacks. Do you have any specific memories or challenges you overcame in overcoming either one of these works?
Well, the challenge at the time, and I guess the big question that I was asking about these dinnerware sets was, I studied in the 70s, and the conversation about ceramics was that it was less than, there was this question about art versus craft around that time. And I discovered ceramics, and up to that point, I was a painter. So that explains why the imagery has so much image and color and, kind of recognizable images. But the question was, why is pottery, even in our community, even less valued than, say, sculpture was? So I started to imagine how could I use dinnerware, which was considered just an object of utility, and begin to change minds or opinions about how we look at that kind of art. So it was a sort of an activist view, really. I wanted to move the vessel forward in a way. And so I adopted ideas of sculpture and ideas of painting to just try to at least comb into that, this philosophy that I was studying at the time. Now, this dinnerware set is not the knickknack piece that I was thinking you all were presenting. I thought it was a cabinet with painting on it. But that piece was made in 1988, 33 years ago, I'm guessing, or around that time. So the challenge was just really just trying to reinvent how I viewed it myself as well, so arrangement came into play, the idea of color, the idea of particular placement, in the putting it in a cabinet so that it was a holistic view of it before you would actually disassemble it maybe and use it on the table should you choose to do that. Wow. Huh.
So then that leads into my second question, which is more particularly about this work of art, Dinnerware as Cactus Garden. Can you tell us a little bit more about this, just this fusion between sculptural and dishware again?
Well, I was pretty excited about the idea when I finally fell into it. And like a lot of things in your creative study, it was accidental. I was just looking at the vessels I was making. They were pottery, and I started stacking them. And when I stacked them, I started seeing an image. And an image is something that I was really involved with when it came to painting. So starting to stack them and realizing that the bowls resembled flowers and that the plates could be leaves is not new to ceramics. If you view its history, you will find flower bowls and leaf plates. But it was assembling them together to create a garden or to create an image of some sort that I think began to transform the idea of something that was of utility into the realm of sculpture. In the application of color, in dealing with it more like a still life, really started to satisfy those ideas that I had about painting. So this work started to become pretty real to me, that it was satisfying a lot of needs that I was thinking about. And again, I began to think that it was really changing how you might view dinnerware.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And my next question is would you be able to show us something that you're working on now?
Well, not completely what I have in the studio, because I don't have a camera or anything, but I did pull up an image of a show that I had at the Columbus Museum of Art and the Everson Museum of Art. And it gives you at least a suggestion of my work over the last number of years.
So would you mind going ahead and sharing your screen so we can all see that?
Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
All right.
So can you tell me a little bit about the blue wall behind the piece, the teardrop pieces? Is that something you selected, or is that something that you worked with the curator to select?
Well, the show was actually curated by Jonathan Frederick Waltz for its initial opening at the Columbus Museum of Art in Georgia. And so we discussed the different kinds of work that I did. I wouldn't say it's a retrospective, but I would say that there was quite a range of work in it. The Tears in the Back Wall started that idea in 1991 when my mother passed away, and they began as rosaries. But the idea of weather has always been a really intriguing thought to me. So I use elements of nature. So the rainstorm or the teardrop piece, depending on how you might view it, is conceptually about water, right? Our use of water, the desert that I grew up in, the tears that we share, the joy, the sadness. I made the first set of tears when my mother passed away, so it had a little to do with mourning. And what's interesting about work that happens over a number of years is that your conceptual idea becomes richer, and you start thinking about things in a grander, bigger way. Maybe initially it was a way to go through a mourning process, but then it started activating a lot of other ideas that I had at the time. So the rocks in the foreground also are about the desert and about the beauty of the desert and the color of the rocks. But it's also a very playful, joyful piece, like gemstones or artificial, something that's artificial that we know doesn't exist in any other place besides, in my mind and maybe now in some form of reality. But I find it to be a pleasure, a viewing pleasure, and a seductive wanting to play or become a part of it. So, but both dealing very much with the idea of nature and growing up in the rugged Southwest, in the background, you see assemblages. I've always been a mixed media artist. And so the piece in the background is boxes filled with little vignettes of different things that you might actually find in the kitchen: wall plaque, a kitchen, plastic plaques, a plaster, pear, cutlery, just various kitchen supplies. Whereas the two framed images deal really more with the landscape of painting in the images that I see in my head about the landscape. Also delve into some ideas of religion and was questioning what that really meant to me. And so art has always been a way for me to ask a question and try to seek an answer that I might believe. So I trust myself, right? But if you look to the lower left, it's the same rocks that you just saw previously, but in a whole different presentation. And it's always interesting when you see your work in different presentations because it allows you another view and another point of view. This is where working with curators is really wonderful because they challenge that and want always to show the work in its greatest light. The piece in front of you here is a piece inspired by my garden. I'm a gardener, have been for a long time. And so I started just looking at the plants that I was raising and trying to let them inspire and motivate a service set. Now this service set, it had been over 20 years or so that I had even conceived anything like this. So it was pretty new and it felt really new. I found it fascinating that something that you had worked on for so many years sometimes feels very refreshed when you remove yourself from it for a considerable amount of time. I could see the values had changed, the colors, the forms, just all the new things that were appearing on these on this older idea. And again, working on some backs because that's what stopped me in the first place from being able to throw pottery. I could no longer work on the wheel, and so I had to begin to reimagine what my work would be. And I started thinking about the paintings, and I started thinking about the figure. The figure is an image that is long-standing in art, similar to the landscape. And I'd always been interested in figurative work, but not in a way to pursue it in the way that I did when I was considering this body of work. So the torsos are actual casting of my back in which I then can put an image or a story or a narrative to talk about some issue that I may be thinking about. And just a more close-up example of one of the tiles, which is really pretty much straightforward imagery. This piece is titled Dirt Devil. So something that people who live in the desert Southwest know about. And I find it such a beautiful image when I see it in nature. It's just so, again, the idea of nature and weather and the things that are caused because of the two colliding or dancing together, the wind and the sand, and some beautiful form pops up into the sky. Just find it very romantic, I guess.
Yes, here in Arizona, we are very familiar with dust devils. But you have changed. This art is helping me think about them differently. I think about how much I have to dust my house after one goes through the valley. So
Yeah.
I have one last question for you. Is that, do you have any advice for the next generation of artists or someone who's trying to make that next step in their career?
That was an interesting question. I spoke to my colleague. I said, oh my gosh, you're asking me a question about advice. And she goes, well, Eddie, you do that every day. I thought, oh yeah. But I think that the first and most important thing, and it was something that I was told very early on when I was a young artist, was to try to be as authentic as possible. It's difficult to find yourself, but when you begin to find that person in the work that is coming out of you naturally, really indulge that. Do not worry about trends. Often that when we look through the trends, and especially now with social media, I think that could begin to act as a stop instead of a go. And you shouldn't allow that to happen because we all work simultaneously. We're all interested in similar things. And so I hate to think of things as a trend, but more as a group of people who are working together to solve one of these problems. And so when I hear a student or person tell me that they stopped doing this because they felt that someone else was already doing it. I think that's an inaccurate way to look at it. I think it's better to look at it as permission, in that both of you are just working towards a similar goal. And sometimes work will look similar, especially if you work with similar materials and processes. I mean, these things are inevitable. I also think that you should keep up with social media, but do not let it consume you, because it is there as information that is very current and about now. And this is very different than when I was growing up in the art world. You know, we didn't have access to the world or to our peers. And now that is a definite access. And I find it really a wonderful venue for me to keep up with what's really going on, keeping your finger right on the pulse as it's happening. I think it's also important to begin to think about how you can market your own work using these new systems of operation, as well as working maybe through a gallery that represents your work. But I think it's also a good time, and now is a perfect time for artists to begin being their own messenger. And social media is a real way to begin to do that and reach a large audience. And finally, take a workshop to learn how to manage a business in the economy of art. I wish that when I was beginning, that I would have had some lessons about how to begin not only making a career for myself, but how to manage that so that it makes sense and you can set your goals and your trajectories in directions that are going to be beneficial. Yes, I learned the School of Hard Knocks, and I will never say that that is a bad way. But now with all these tools that we have available, I think it's a good idea. That's my advice to young emerging artists.
Thank you so much for that advice. I can see it has so many great applicable points, even for people outside of people who want to be an artist. I want to thank you so much for your time. And it was great getting this opportunity to see some of your more recent works to compare to some of our works from the late 80s. So thank you so very much, Eddie.
I really appreciate it, Amanda. Thank you.
You're welcome. And next, I had the opportunity to talk with the artist collective Clades earlier this week. They are based out of Denmark, and so the timing of this reception was in the middle of the night for them. So they've also, we pre-recorded our interview with them. They began working together in 2000 and both studied ceramics in Copenhagen. Hi, I was hoping that you two would talk for a moment about your piece, True Feelings 2007, and how your work has continued along these same lines, or if it has evolved to include new works. And do you have any specific memories of creating this artwork together?
Well, we have, to start with, we can tell you about the beginning of the project, because we made it, or the whole idea about True Feelings is these fingerprints in the clay. And we came up with that idea actually working blindfolded at first, because we really wanted to sense the clay and feel our way to the products somehow. And so we made an exhibition with pieces that were made blindfolded at first. And then,
Yeah, well, in the beginning, we wanted to try and make a kind of conceptual project, and we were inspired by the Dogma films, where they had these Dogma rules, and that you had to strictly follow, and that something totally new came out of that. So we tried to do the same with the ceramics. So we made actually 10 Dogma rules, and one of them was to work blindfolded, and another one was to work in this kind of scale, what you can have in your hands, and that we wanted to make functional objects. And so this is how we, and everything had to be blue at that time. So the first pieces were all blue and very naive and childish in a way, but also very sensual and nice, and you could almost fall in love with the pieces. And then we started to do it in porcelain.
Yes, and because this finger sensation, or these prints were very nice, and at the same time quite rough, because the way that we make it is quite rough actually, because we just press our fingers into the clay so very quickly. But even though it looks very sort of delicate, and you also asked if we were still working in the same kind of line, and we're still making these things a little bit at a time, just to, because they're still very nice to make, but we are not sort of producing them or something like that, but
only in a small scale.
In a very small scale.
And we do it in different colors. We've also colored the porcelain clay.
Mm-hmm.
So we've made some nice pink and yellowish and blue colors. So we still make this series. And aside from that, we continue working in the same way, that we try to take things from other worlds into our ceramic world and get inspired to do something that we didn't expect ourselves to do.
Yes, yeah. So this conceptual way of making things is still something that we do
all the time.
Yeah, that's the only thing we do.
That's wonderful and so great to hear. So what is your favorite part about working collaboratively together?
Well, we've done it for 20 years now, and 21 years now, and it's just, well, I couldn't imagine not doing it, but and it's become such a natural part of
we don't even know how to do things separately anymore.
No.
It's we have a very good dialogue, and we always have a lot of fun working.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get good ideas, it's so nice to have someone to share it with, and to be,
enthusiastic,
together. So the process of making ideas is the best, right? And then there's a lot of hard work in maybe not succeeding in getting the right expression, but that's also a fun process. And when we nail it, we just feel so pleased and fulfilled. So,
and the whole way that we work with the concepts is very much also a product of being two, I think, that we can talk to each other. So I don't think we could make the same things if we were just one of us.
Mm-hmm. It's so great to hear and see about your collaboration and knowing how long it's been. And yeah, I think it's great. Is there something you could show or tell us about something you're working on now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could actually.
We could, yeah.
Should I bring the computer and take the plastic of the trousers? Yeah,
or maybe no, you cannot take the.
Oh,
maybe we should tell a little bit about our newest concept.
Yeah, I do it, and then I get you can tell.
Well, last year we made an exhibition that we called Clady's Selfies, and we were inspired by this concept of making a museum selfie, that you go to a museum and you want to stage yourself with the artwork. And so this time, with all this staging yourself and taking selfies, was kind of a new inspiration. So we ended up doing these rather large pieces that are hand modeled, that you can actually stand behind and do a selfie. And then the main things are inspired by clothing, but we also did things that you could put up, like a duck face, like a mouth that makes big lips, or we made these dick pic pots that you could stand behind. That, so kind of humorous objects, but also okay. Yeah, it's fashionable. Be careful. Should I bring the computer?
Yeah, maybe also to the trash.
I bring the computer. Because you can see Tina is about to hand model some trousers. It's probably difficult to see.
Is it difficult to see?
No,
So
I
these
can
are
get a good view of it.
It's not very good.
Or maybe you should stand over here behind the.
No, I can see it. I can see it.
Can you?
Nej,
You
det
do
er
it.
dig.
You do it.
Det er den filmer på den.
Ja.
Nej.
Okay. You do it.
So you should move. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
This is the behind. So it's like a pair of trousers that you can stand behind, or
Yeah, and make a selfie.
perhaps you can stand
Stand like
in
this.
front of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, last year we made a pair of jeans and a sweater and
Yeah. Just different kinds of selfies.
and there is a
Should I take this? There's also like this is
hairstyle.
like a hairstyle, but it's actually a bowl, but then it's also a very large hairstyle.
Yeah,
But but that's what we're working on now.
And it's
Absolutely
for-
love it.
and it's for an exhibition in Denmark at a ceramic museum in called Clay on Fyn.
Yeah.
And well, we have some pictures on the website of some of the pieces that we already made, and yeah, that's what we're doing right now.
That is fabulous. I absolutely love it. And I hope one day to be able to take a selfie with one of those pieces.
Yeah.
So for my last question, what advice do you have for the next generation of artists?
Yeah, that's the hard question, because, well, for us, it has always worked out. Well, we've always done whatever we felt like. We've been very true to our own
Integrity.
yeah.
So it's never, we are never driven by money or profit, or it's always what we want to express. So we work in a maybe more artistic way than a design approach, which suits us really well.
It's I think it's different what works for different people, but for us, and it's just to, I mean,
I think one good advice is to have a experimental process, to make many to always try and not just think of what you have in your head, but make many experiments and then see what comes out of it, so you're not like locked in a special kind of I don't know.
no, that's right. To be able to look at what you're actually standing in front of and try to see things with as if you've never seen them before.
Yeah, and not be afraid of making things that are totally out of the question. Just do it and then analyze on it afterwards, and something always comes out of it.
Yeah.
For us, it does.
There's always something right in front of you. You just have to try and see it. Yeah.
And then to do collaborations.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
so much more fun than just being yourself doing artwork, I think. And it's amazing that you can actually have a common expression, and that both of us feels that that this is our work, even though it's done in together.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank Cladies again for participating in this. And if anyone has any questions for either Eddie or Cladies, they both have agreed to answer questions, and we will post them in the comments when we share this video on YouTube. And now we will go to back to Mary-Beth.
I would like to introduce the next panelist, Joan Barron. Joan was on our advisory committee for DinnerWhere. and she is the principal of Barron Studio in South Scottsdale, Arizona. She's an environmental artist, an urban garden activist, adventurer, public space game changer, and a seed saver. So her aesthetic encompasses a passion for nurturing community through large and small art interventions that seek to bring a renewed awareness of place. This can take the form as edible landscapes, contemplative walks, social justice projects, or political commentary through site-specific interactive installations and guerrillascaping. Joan believes that hands-on art experiences provide a much-needed runway for confidence building, which inspires rich, immersive collaborations between all ages and diverse cultures. So in our exhibition, in our education space, we have two of Joan's videos continually playing. One is the Food in the Alley project, and the other one is Forgotten Grains, which we will provide links to those videos if you'd like to open those up and see those a little bit later, as well as her website from her artist website. So since I just brought up Food in the Alley, Joan, do you want to start with that project and then maybe get into your seed pots and then talk about community gardens?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. So I always get excited when food is in the conversation. Being a clay artist for, gosh, over 40 years now, the two just work so well together because you're already digging in the earth, which is where we find clay. So there's all these wonderful connections. And then feeding people and having vessels, making vessels to serve food in. And like you were saying earlier, Mary-Beth, finding just that right vessel that feels so good in your hands and makes the food taste better, and you have a real personal connection. So Food in the Alley came about when I literally ran out of space to grow. I was so excited about my successes and the amount of food that we can grow here in the desert Southwest. And I just went for a walk, and I ended up out in my alley and realized that my entire back block wall was that other side in the alley was facing south. And for us here in Arizona, that is the optimal orientation to grow food for the longest period of time. So I began to dig and prepare and make some rich soil for myself and ran it to full, it's about 50 lineal feet. And then I went out as far as I could go without interfering with the city trucks picking up their trash, or the other trucks picking up the organic materials, the brush and such. And I was able to come out a good 3 feet because we were very lucky. Our alley is pretty wide. So on our side, on the neighbor's side to the south, there's not as much space the way it's laid out. So I've been growing food now. It's like a laboratory. And like the women were saying just a few moments ago about experimenting, that's what growing food is all about too. I'm sure Marilyn and Sarah can speak to that, right? It's like you never know what's going to pop up, and it might grow in a southern exposure, but it may not grow in a northern exposure, even though the packet of seeds tells you otherwise. You just have to keep experimenting, and I love that part. Having worked with clay for so many years. So, and then the whole topic of seed saving comes up because you're watching your plants go through their changes, and you're seeing all the dried seeds, and you're learning that, oh my goodness, if I just collect these dry seeds, I'm going to have heirloom seeds for the next season. And then where am I going to put all these seeds? So I started making little seed pots. And I have a couple. I don't know how well you'll be able to see these, but this is only maybe 1.5 inches tall. But I have probably, 50 moringa seeds in there. And the moringa seed is a tree. Each one of these seeds, you can grow a tree, and every part of that tree is edible. So the important, fact that I like to emphasize about that, and why doing the Food in the Alley project was so relevant for me, is I was looking for ways to be able to feed more people, see us be able to feed more people. There's just absolutely no excuse that for anyone to go hungry and for anyone to have to rely on foods that aren't nutrient packed and nutrient dense. So Food in the Alley became a place where I invited people to come, and still do, to come and take whatever is ready to harvest. Right now, tomatoes are like thousands of tomatoes, all sizes, all flavors. It's just so cool. Some of them are growing upwards of 6 feet, and they're climbing all over the moringa tree and the mulberry tree and the citrus. And so, it's just so much fun. And I've met all my neighbors taking out their trash and then we share the Food in the Alley. So it's just been really quite wonderful. And the other video Mary-Beth's referencing was a challenge put out by National Geographic. And the question was, how are we going to feed 9 billion people? And I thought, well, I can answer that. I have a solution. So the little video, my friends and I got all my friends together. It's my directorial debut, 1 minute long video, but I think it's really sweet, and I think you'll get the idea. And it's about planting seeds. If we all just took a little spot in our yards or gardens or pots on your patio and just planted some seeds and see what you could grow. And it's amazing. And whatever you have an abundance of, the idea is to go share it and make that intentional gesture to share it with your neighbors. And the neighbors will be inspired, and they'll go, how did you do that? And you share the seeds with them and bring them over to your garden, which we do here on a regular basis now. We're even a tour stop sometimes when Desert Botanical Gardens in Phoenix organizes garden tours. So that's always lots of fun. So the cool thing about clay is that it holds, keeps things really dry. So, I mean, I have loofah seeds in this little tiny guy. And to keep things really protected, I just make little tile covers. This one is like a little carved sunflower. And we also talk a lot about growing flowers, pollinator flowers, so that we're keeping our native bees. And it doesn't matter where you live, you want to grow flowers and different vegetables and fruits that the bees in your region of the country will be most attracted to, because they're all part of the family. And this little guy, I have jalapeno pepper seeds. So the other thing that I want to share is I started making these, they're called ollas, and they have a really interesting history of being used for storing seeds, but also for irrigation. So we're always looking here to save water, because like Andrea was saying, we're wishing we had a rainstorm here, right? But you fill these up with water, and you plant, you dig a hole in your garden, and you leave maybe up to an inch above ground so that you can refill it with water. And the clay acts as a storage container. And what's really cool is that it will only let out as much water as the soil needs for the plants in the surrounding area. It has this beautiful relationship with the moisture in the soil, and it will stop allowing the water to seep out of the vessel. So this one I did in a pit firing. So it has a narrow neck, which also helps with keeping the water from evaporating. And here's another one, just a regular, just red clay. I love making them because I like also growing gourds and loofah, sponges. And here's another one that.
Joan, while you're showing those, can you tell them a little bit about the community gardens?
Oh, sure. Yeah, when I make these and also save seeds, where we also share everything at the community garden that we are volunteers at. And the one that my husband and I love to work at is in Tempe, Arizona, and it's called the Clark Park Community Gardens. It's on Roosevelt, just north of Broadway. And what's really great about getting yourself involved in community gardens is that you're able to share your experiences, you build community, which is so important. You're addressing all these different issues around food justice and food insecurity, which is really, really important. We serve a broad community with our community agriculture bags that we fill at 3 times a month for people who participate. And we also honor the SNAP program for people that are in a lower economic bracket and would normally not be able to afford these nutrient dense foods, which we believe everybody has a right to have them. So by combination of community gardening, where you're bringing everybody in, there's no restriction, it costs nothing, just your volunteer time, and you end up taking home food to your family from what is being harvested in the garden. We have a free table every Saturday morning when we bag the food that people have pre-ordered. So it's a really wonderful way to get to know people that you might not, normally get a chance to know. All the friends we have made gardening there are all new people for us over the last, 4 or 5 years now. So that's been really a significant part of, sharing and seeing that seeds are political. I mean, it's a really huge issue, the whole theme around food and food justice. And this is one great way to really address that, is to participate in a community garden.
Thank you, Joan. We did put the link into Clark Gardens as well, and you could find information about volunteering and events that are happening as well, right?
Right. And I'll just add one other thing. There's also a, speaking of clay and the importance of the conversation around food, recently did a piece, which was a collaboration. And I agree that everyone should take the time to collaborate with another artist or a group of artists on a project. And this piece was performative. It was called A Good Trouble Bucket. And you can watch the performance on Vimeo, and I'll provide Mary-Beth with that link. And Good Trouble Bucket spoke to this whole idea of, if you have to cause a little trouble to do good in the world, it's worth it. And that's really what I did when I created Food in the Alley. I did not ask permission. And that's one of the first questions I always get from when I give talks to groups, is they want to know if I asked permission to do that. And I said no. And the reason is because I was pretty sure that they would tell me no. And it wouldn't matter why. They would just say no. And the no is really based on just misinformation or not having the education as to what the benefits are going to be down the road and what the idea of doing it is down the road. So I just did it. And I really wished I had gotten into trouble, because then it would have brought more attention to the purpose for doing it.
Right.
Good Trouble Bucket speaks to the idea of families sharing food and borders, and being restricted with these borders between our countries is unacceptable. And how do we address that? So we use clay to deliver the message, as well as sharing food through a chain link fence.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Mary-Beth.
Yeah. So I know that we're over a little bit. We have one more guest. Hillary, you're the finale. So Hillary Bryant, she was also on the advisory committee, and she is the community engagement manager of Waste Not. Waste Not provides wholesome and nourishing food to recipient partners that really impact the quality of life of hundreds of men, women, and children throughout the Valley. So Hillary, if you can just tell us a little bit about Waste Not, maybe resources for people, and then also just quickly talk about the collaboration that your organization has with local potters that have empty bowls events throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible so everyone can get on with their evenings. Thank you for having me. First off, I'm really excited to be here. I work in the nonprofit world, but I really love art. It's really spoken to me for my whole life, so I'm really happy to be here. Waste Not is a local nonprofit in the Phoenix Valley. We started because a woman was literally dumpster diving to feed her family because they were hungry. And she found all this really great, fresh, amazing food in these dumpsters. And there was excess, there was too much for her family to eat. So she started bringing it to homeless shelters, and then started recruiting her friends to drive in their trucks to other nonprofits. And it's just grown and grown and grown. We've been a part of the Valley for about 35 years, and our operations have grown significantly. We have a fleet of 5 trucks. We also use technology and volunteer drivers to transport smaller volumes of food to make our operations more efficient. Last year, we delivered 2.9 million meals throughout the Valley and rescued 1,434 tons of food from local landfills. So our mission is twofold: to feed the hungry and to save the environment and keep that food waste from going into the landfill, because it creates lots and lots of methane, which is really terrible for the environment. As far as economic value goes, we generated almost $3.3 million in economic value last fiscal year for us. So I really love being a part of the Waste Not team. The work we do is so inspiring to me. We also collaborate with the Arizona Clay Association, which I love doing because I said I love art. And I have an example of one of their bowls that I actually bought. It's an empty bowls event. So they create these bowls to signify all the empty bowls around the world. And we have a big annual event in October. And then we've started doing small pop-up events because the demand for these events is so high, which is great. But our big event in October, all the Arizona Clay Association members come and volunteer, and we sell these bowls along with a meal to, again, signify all the empty bowls around the world. And if you're interested in coming to one of our pop-up events, we're having one on May 8th. The Downtown Phoenix Farmers Market is hosting us. They're doing a Friends on First artisan market a little bit north of where the actual farmers market is, maybe like a block or two north. So that's happening May 8th, the day before Mother's Day. So we're really excited if you want to grab a bowl. They're gorgeous. They're beautiful, beautiful bowls to support your community, the Clay Association, and Waste Not.
Thank you, Hillary. And we did put the link to Waste Not in the chat. And I'm assuming too, on the website, they would have volunteer opportunities where they can reach out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also have, I neglected to mention that the way Waste Not works is that we collect this food from grocery stores, restaurants, caterers, etc. And we use our either vehicles or volunteer drivers to transport that to other nonprofits. We work with about almost 90 other nonprofits throughout the Valley. So if you're looking for resources, we have, I'll put the link in the chat right now. We have a list of nonprofits that we work with if you or someone you know is looking for more food.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Hillary.
Sure.
One last question for you. Have you made yourself your own bowl?
I have not. I've actually never dabbled in pottery before. I would love to try it.
Yeah.
It looks really fun. I don't
You
know.
have to come to my studio.
Yeah,
Yep,
for sure.
Yep. You can get produce at Joan's Alley.
That's
She'll
right.
give you a lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down for that.
All
Definitely.
right.
All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. It was wonderful. Andrea?
I'm joined by my lovely assistant right now. So apologies. But I just want to thank you everyone for taking the time, spending your evening with us. Feel free to reserve your ticket to visit the CRC. We'll include the link in the bottom. And we look forward to seeing you at the museum soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.